What? Digital art. Sure. No. I'm live. Yeah. Hello. How's everybody today? So we're talking about comics today. Yay. Just the usual disclaimer. This is just going to be stuff that I do. I'm not, set out to be a teacher and this kind of stuff. If anything, I should probably go and read some stuff myself. But I guess the bottom line is like, read a book on this stuff. And that today is just what I do for comic composition and such. It's a lot of the stuff I learned just by doing it. But, yeah. So, I think since it's just going to be like starting out talking about it, the best place to start is just general rectangle and square panels. Oh my gosh, I'm in a Discord voice chat with Brooke and other people, and I heard you. Thought it was Brooke talking to me. I'm doing pretty good. Every week I do a stream, I realize I'm like, I had time to prep something, but I just don't. I did a little bit this time, but yeah, as far as starting out learning comic layouts, I would recommend even just Googling, stuff like basic layouts. I like this one called it Kirby layouts, because, Kirby is known for being a friend, shaped like a friend. Yay. Boyo. But the nice thing about basic layouts like this is that they're very familiar, they're very easy to get started with. There's a lot of these already set up for you. So if you're worried about paneling first, you can try these out. There are a lot of them, and even if you see one that's like kind of close, and you're like, shoot, I want something similar to this one. It's just like maybe have a long panel in the middle here, or something. You can always modify what you find. But rectangles and squares are definitely a good place to start off with. Something else you've probably heard before is that the bigger a panel, so bigger, generally means more important. It's something you want people to focus on more. Like, if we take one of these layouts and find one with like some big panels and some little panels, like say this one here. You wouldn't have like some huge revelation in this panel because it's so tiny, and then it's also not the last panel, so like, what, you're my father? Let's go get tacos or something. Like you would want to end probably with the big revelation, especially like this is a bigger panel. But if, again, depending on how big of a revelation it is, you might even want, like one like this, or, something like this. Sometimes even a full page, depending on the oomph you want from it. This layout right here would probably be good for an establishing shot. And if you're new to comic terminology, which, to be honest, I only know a little bit of the official terminology, because again, mostly self-taught, just going by the seat of my pants. An establishing shot is showing off the area that the characters are in. So like, if this were your page, it would probably be something like, the characters just got out from behind some bushes, and then, maybe like a reaction shot of someone going like, wow, wow, and then you see them down in the corner here from the bushes, and it's just like a big sweeping, like river with, huge castle. It's not gonna be good, obviously. I'm doing this very fast, but or like a town, because it gives you that big like wow factor, the landscape out before you. Right? Because like trying to fit all this into like a panel, like here, you wouldn't get that same awe, because it would just be like, here's like, tiny thing right here, and then you had like a character shot here. It's gonna make this character feel bigger than, the grand landscape you're supposed to be having down here, which, shouldn't be the case. It should be, a wow factor. Unless you were playing with it to make it like a joke. Like maybe your main character is just really self-absorbed and just doesn't care about that kind of stuff. So then like the other characters are like, wow, reacting to the landscape over here, and your character is just like, haha, I'm the greatest, yeah. Oh god, I did so much. Another thing that is good for panel composition is thinking about how long, quote unquote, you want the reader to stay on a panel. Because if it's a bigger one, and that can be height-wise or width-wise, then it implies that you'll be there longer, right? So for instance, one of my favorite series, and I don't have like the image of it right now, but I'll just like redraw it. One of the pages has a character stare at another character, and the panel is like this, and they're in profile on the side here, and that's it. It's just, you see the character with the profile here, and then it's a bunch of negative space here. And for me, at the least, doing it that way, and it was a manga, so you read this way, gives it this feeling of a long stare. And like, yeah, you can glance at that, like, in reality, you're only looking at it for a few seconds, but even those few milliseconds will give a different impression, as opposed to like if the panel was cut off here, right? Because it just shows you how long of a stare line it is, right? And if you were in a show or something, they might have this in the show, like if it's on a TV, this is how big the frame would be, and then it gives that impression of like it's gonna pan this way. I hope I'm not like getting too far into stuff here. I hope it still like makes sense. But there's just a lot to comic composition that it is hard to know exactly where to start. So another thing that I can recommend is just to practice with it. And you hear that all the time. You're like, oh man, you're like, I am practicing. And what I mean is, try to practice with something that is low stakes. Like make a very small no, not important project, of like Stickman Joe and, I don't know, Sketch Sally. And their entire adventures are just thumbnailing comics to get ideas, see how things work. Because if you practice all the time with your baby project, the one that you want to be perfect. This looks weird. Low stakes baby. Oh my god. Don't take that out of context. If you always practice with, your project that you're putting your heart and soul into, naturally you're going to want it to always be perfect and such. And that's not the best for learning and practicing, because from the onset, when you're learning and practicing, you gotta make mistakes because you're learning, right? But what was it? Oh, your phone. But if you're practicing with Stickman Joe and Sketchy Sally, which I should make her like actually sketchy, like like maybe she's got like a bat or something. I don't know. That looks like a tail. Whatever. If you have low stakes projects, ones that you set out to not really be as invested in, then you practice with those, because then it doesn't matter if there's mistakes or things aren't going quite the right way, because it's not your baby project. It's not your your heart and soul project. It's like, whatever, Stickman Joe, Sketchy Sally, like it can even be stuff that it's like you're never going to show this to anybody. You set out with that idea, you're just like, who cares if it looks awful? I'm the only one looking at it. And I don't want to quite put it this way, but this is kind of how my comic blog works, where like I love all the games I do and I love the jokes and putting my own spin on things and having fun with it, but ultimately all of those are low stakes, because like they're not my characters, they're not overall my stories, they're just small little jokes, but they're giving me chances to practice these things, practice these types of panels and such without having to worry about like I've put out some comics before where I'm like, I tried something here, but it didn't quite work the way I thought it was going to work, but I learned something from it. But like if it was one of my, if I had started with, a project I really had my heart in, that'd be a little devastating, like, oh man, I didn't put my best foot forward, and now this is part of, this project that I love, and it just didn't come out right? But another good type of panel, because we talked about establishing shots before with environments in like a big panel like this. Oftentimes it actually is like a full page, either a full page or something like this, where there's very little that isn't the environment. Another type is a beat panel, and I use these a lot, and these are the copy paste panels. These are really good, especially if say you picked out one of these layouts and you're having a really good time with it, but then you realize like, shoot, I have one more panel that I need to fill, but like I already drew everything and I mean, hopefully you're doing thumbnailing and sketching and stuff, so that doesn't happen. But say it does, then you can just use your beat panel and have it go over twice, or change minor things between the two. That's what I really like to do, is to add something like, more sweat drops. Maybe like eyebrows. Maybe their eyes got bigger, like, wait. Maybe they, have their eye change its position or something. It has that same feeling as what I mentioned before with that really long panel. If the exact same scene is focused on twice, it gives that feeling of length, like of time. Same as sometimes you will see, if time is passing, you'll see something like this. It's often when somebody's like falling unconscious, you'll see that a lot. Where they do this and it's just like, it's fading a little bit. I hope this is all making sense so far. Also, I was just curious, is my mic working fine? Like, the frame rate and everything is going through fine? My internet has been a little bit slower lately, so I wasn't sure about that. Oh, yep, drop frames. 19% over the last 2 minutes ago. Shoot. So I'm just gonna type here in case the microphone isn't working well. Oh, okay, so 2 of you say that you can hear me and the mic is working fine. Okay, so the stream has been a bit iffy. Okay. Yeah, it says here that... Oh man, 25% over the last 2 minutes. Yeah, it seems like it's been dropping quite a few frames. I'm not sure why, though. Well, I have a little sneaking suspicion of why that might be, but... You guys are saying the mic is working okay, though, right? Hi, Ocean! Just because, if the mic is working okay, that's honestly probably the more important part. Just because I'm doing a lot of talking rather than, specific drawing. And I usually, hover on a part for a decent amount of time. So, it's not the end of the world if, I did retweet this, example layout on my Twitter. So if you guys were, interested in this specific one, you can definitely go check that out. I do think this is a really good, starting out one. And like I said, you can really easily Google, comic layouts and that. Also, if you have any sort of art program, yeah, if you have any sort of art program, most of them have rectangle tools, and by most I mean all of them. I really, honestly, I don't know if I can think of one that doesn't have a rectangle tool. So you can even just do something like, well, I just filled that in, but I can deselect this, just doing something like this. And obviously you want to think about what types of things you want to be happening on the page. But then you can just fill that in, right? And then bam, little comic thing. Oh Jesus, no proper erasers in the art program? Oh my god. Hi Mew. But yeah, so if you're starting out with comic composition, Oh no! Oh no, Zelos. It sounds like, for other people... Oh, there you go. Nice. Okay, it loaded. But yeah, so if you're starting out with comics and layouts, just looking at these basic layouts, start with... Sorry, I don't know. I feel like Zelos would be the way you'd pronounce it with an X. Cellos? I don't know. But yeah, if you're starting out, rectangles and squares for the basics are a good place to start. Also, again, just because of the rectangle tools and such that most art programs have. It's just going to be a lot easier to start it out there. And as we mentioned before, bigger panels equals, more focus, more time, relatedly, more importance. And of course, on the flip side, smaller panels is the opposite of that, right? The only time I can think that a smaller panel might have something important is like, a detective manga where a little clue is in a small panel, right? Oh, bye, Ocean. Maybe I gotta do it at a different time or something. This always seems to be dinner time for people. Maybe a bit later or something, I don't know. But yeah, so bigger focus on bigger panels. And then the way that they're bigger can influence how they're read as well. Oof. Yeah, if it's like awful, I'm hoping that the recording for the stream isn't going to be as bad. And then I'll upload that on YouTube, so there'll at least be that. But I do have a sneaking suspicion on why that is. Okay. Is my window open? No. Yeah, have a good time, Lufico. What are you watching though, before you go? I haven't had many problems until now. And again, I think I have a suspicion on my end why it might be like that. So I'm just gonna check that out after today. Because I really enjoy doing these streams, just chatting with people. Just want to check. Oh darn. Oh Jesus, 38 dropped. Goodness. Mew, are you still in the chat? Just because I know that you had asked about it. I'm glad to hear that it's fun to watch. I worry about that sometimes. Because I'm just like sitting here talking about stuff. Oh my gosh. Wait, what? Oh, you guys are watching some Kill la Kill. I thought... See, okay, Lufico. I thought that the song on my playlist was from Kill la Kill. So I thought you were commenting on my music. But I have it muted. So I was like, what are you talking about? Hi, Mew. So did you have any like specific questions on comic composition? Just because I know a good chunk. Like I work with it a lot, obviously, but there's so much to it that like it's hard to find that starting point. while I'm waiting for you to answer, I think another good thing to go over is the amount of content you have on a page. If I'm gonna be honest, I would say that a page, like if you're gonna go to an equivalent of like writing, in a book, for me, it usually seems that a comic page is like a paragraph almost. And like obviously it can be different depending on the page, but just generally I feel like that's a pretty good, like, not a long paragraph, but a shortish paragraph. Because, there'll be the sentences in writing that describe what the characters are doing, a few things of dialogue, and by the time you have everything for those panels, it's like, a paragraph. And if you want to go further, each panel can probably be like 1 or 2 sentences. So if you're like trying to make something you wrote book-wise into a comic, this could be a decent guide. Again, it always depends, because like say if a panel had 2 people talking and doing something, that could be 4 sentences, right? Because 1 for each descriptor of what the characters are doing, and then 1 for each of their dialogues. Okay, so maybe starting with speech bubbles or how to focus on the subject in the picture. Okay. So I might open some of my previous comics just to see what I did and then like use those as references. Just because obviously I know exactly what my brain was thinking when I did it. This one might be a good one to start with. So, okay, so starting with speech bubbles or how to focus on the subject in the picture. So, whenever I am doing comics, I do always want to think about, what do I want to have happening in the picture? And for the most part, I usually take, Zillows. I actually reblogged a speech bubble tutorial on my Tumblr, and it was really good. It might have been the same one, might have been different, not entirely sure. But when I have comic panels, I usually try to have, maybe a third of the panel to the character, and then you have the negative space. It's kind of a weird, like, way to do it, but I guess you see it. Negative space available for, speech bubbles, sound effects, showing background, stuff like that. It just makes it a lot easier. It also obviously helps to know, what roughly do you want to have the character saying in this panel. A good rule of thumb that I try to do is that in this panel, it was a little bit different, but I try to have like 1 speech bubble per character per panel. That's a baseline. Obviously, this one is different, but the reason that's a baseline is that I don't want to have 2 conflicting speech bubbles. So like if this was sad, I don't want this next one to be happy, because this happy one wouldn't fit with the sad face. And it might be different if I had her like sad here and then had the impression that she then very quickly changed to a happy mood for whatever reason. Because for speed in a panel, if you have it within the same panel, it means it's very fast. Like so fast that you didn't even have time to like go to another panel. It was just like zip, like immediately, like, oh man, I wonder if we're gonna be okay. Yeah, we will be okay. Like that. There was no time between those 2 differences. But both of these are sad. So that's why I had the two of them, because they both fit her sad face here. And like it still wasn't too much like words overall. You do want to avoid, I do sometimes do this where I have like walls of text in the background, but in general you want to avoid that because it's too much in one panel. Detective Conan does that a lot, where like, I'm not kidding you, they'll have like the character being like right here, and like they're talking about like the poison was used with the blah blah blah, and then it's just like info dump. Like, I am not even kidding, it's just all over the entire thing, and that's the panel, and like that's so unappealing. And like I get why they have to do it, but you generally want to avoid that. The times that I do it, you'll notice it's always in the background, and that's because the joke is that they're rambling. And I don't expect people to read that. You can if you want to. You know, like, you can. I make it an option, though, so you don't have to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, this is an entire paragraph. Yeah, exactly, Mew. You skim those panels, because for the most part, people don't want to read those. But if you have it just broken up in chunks like this, it makes it a lot easier to swallow. As far as this panel went, like I said, both of these speech bubbles, fit this expression for this character. And then the speech bubble here is from a character that is off screen. And I had them off screen because I want this next panel to have the punch of, we're gonna leave you here. Which, if they had been present here, unless you saw their back, so you didn't see like where they were going, it wouldn't have had that oomph. And something that could have been done, which I just decided not to, just because I wanted this focus of this character, because she's only going to show up like once, right? Is I could have like moved her over here, and then, like, this is just an option I had. I could have had, you know, her speech bubbles about like, oh, thank goodness you're going to help me right here. And then, even then, it's not like a lot of room left to have the character here. So, like, I could have had, maybe one here about thank you for helping me. I could have shortened what she was saying, depending on, like, again, what I wanted to do. And I could have had the character here so that the back is here. So then when you flip the camera, you're like, oh, the door is behind them, they're leaving. Another good reference I find for comic panel layouts is thinking about it kind of like a camera. Do you know what I mean? Where, like, how would you imagine it if it was a scene in your head and you're watching it on a show? Right? So, like, the camera is in front of her for this panel. And then it swung around so that it's behind her now. Right? So, like, the camera's here now. It's focusing on these three over here. Try refreshing Mew. Oh wait, I guess it cut out for you, so you can't hear me. Oh no! And then I just wanted a reaction shot for her. If you were here earlier, you might remember that I was talking about the negative space. So you can see, I still kind of had like that third thing with her there, but there's nothing around her. And it just gives this impression of like, and like, you can even kind of get that feeling on, like, if I shrunk her even more and had like nothing around her, and ignore for a second, the blue is going to be like different. Maybe this one? Yeah. Honestly, I probably should have gone with that. That looks so much good. This looks better. But, like, it gives this impression of like, You're alone in the world. Right? Like, you can see how that extra negative space added so much. So in cinematography, there's a thing called the 180-degree rule. Is that a thing in comics too? I mentioned earlier that I'm not very familiar with actual terminology because I'm pretty self-taught, but I think I know what you're talking about. And if it's what I'm thinking about, then I believe so, yes. I do that a lot, where I'll have a character, like, to keep them roughly in the same position the whole comic. I'll use that, where I flip the camera back and forth, so that they can stay roughly in the same position. Like, she doesn't... It's not, like, taboo to put her over here or something. And it's actually often why I've started them in the middle. But it creates kind of a through line where you know where she is the whole time. And then another question, practical question. When you make a comic page, do you spend a considerable time compared to the entire process on how to lay out panels and bubbles? Or is it more of a smooth and easy process? For me, because I've done so many, like, because I started in 2015 a lot. I already done more before that, here and there, like when I was in the Detective Conan fanon a long time ago. I did comics for that too. And, like, even when I was a little kitty, with D's, not T's, I'm not a cat. I did comics when I was young too. So for me, it's a pretty smooth process because I've done it so much that I have, basic strategies that I already like. Like I said, like, I like to do the flip around thing a lot. So that helps me a lot to know what I'm doing. And also, like, I read a lot of comics. I try to pay attention to what they're doing, that affects me, with enough practice, it comes more naturally. And that's why I had mentioned before, having... It really helps to have a low stakes, small project that means almost nothing to you. Like, you could even call it, like, these are the practice bros, or the practice sisters, or the practice siblings family, whatever. Like, you could create something that is specifically supposed to, like, not be that good or whatever, so that you're not working with your baby project, the one that you love with all your heart, to practice these things that maybe you're afraid of, right? Because then you'll grow the skills to just do it, like, more naturally, and you'll be more confident to use those skills on the projects that you care for more, right? Like, make the low stakes project so that you can take those risks without being afraid, learn from them, and then if you have to take those risks, quote unquote, with your, passion project, it won't be as much of a risk now because you've done it before, you know the route through the cave, so to speak, that it's easier for you to do it, right? So basically, the 180-degree rule is a rule in cinematography to make things feel less jarring by keep the camera consistent. If someone's on the left side of the screen, keep them on the left side of the screen. And I had showed that here before too, with that, like, basic through line. And you could probably almost see it in pretty much most of my comics. This one too, show it. So this entire time, Sakura is on the left. And then Tomoyo is here. Kira moves a little bit because he is guiding her away. But a lot of the stuff that you can notice in, like, cinematography can apply to comics because, especially with panels that are shaped like a TV screen, like, you have the same dimensions, right? So it's a bit, especially the way I do comics, it's a bit like storyboarding. So you can take a lot of things from other media and bring them to comics. That said, it's also like there are differences, of course. And for instance, one thing I notice in like adapting comics is there will be so many times where you guys remember where, I don't know if it's in here anymore. Yeah, okay, it must not have been here. But earlier I mentioned if something is in the same panel, that gives the impression that it is very fast. And I often see in like manga or like comics that get adapted into shows, they'll have panels where like somebody like bursts through a door and they have a message and they shout something, and then somebody else is like, oh my gosh, you just burst into my door, then this person yells first, and then the other person yells second, like, what are you doing in here? Or, oh, you were in there the whole time. And what happens when they adapt this, I find, is that sometimes they'll have the character that's like doing, the through the door thing, and they do their shouting line, and then this character, like the whole time that they're shouting, is just kind of like this, like they haven't reacted yet because it's not their line yet, right? This one comes first, this one comes second. But yeah, this panel is simultaneous and fast. It's fast. What this really feels like, at least to me, is that these are almost happening at the same time. Like that their stuff would be almost overlapping. Or at least very, very quick. So if you ever see a line that's like super long in this speech bubble, it kind of feels weird because this should be so quick. If there was a beat for this person to not react, it would have been like that. Like they would have had the panel where, they were like reading a book and they did this. And then the next panel would be, this person, like the back of them. And then the book person like, oh my gosh, what are you doing in my room? Right? So like this is a 2-panel thing. But that's how it almost is always translated, I find. Like this one panel almost always gets adapted into something that feels like 2 panels to me. If that makes any sense. And of course the camera doesn't change, it's more of like a beat panel, but yeah. Yeah, of course, if you're doing more complex pages, like if you have, triangles or, people going outside of the panel or weird panel shapes, stuff like that. Something like this, I don't know, just different shapes. And then like say, like a character could be like, maybe they tripped or they're falling or something. And they're like, ah. And then this is like everybody's reactions. Oh, that's good to hear, Aqua. I wish it wasn't messing up as much. Yeah. I'm bringing up the non-rectangular layouts just to point out that, like the cinema stuff can work really, really well. Honestly, I would recommend that as a, like, sort of to the side reference, because if you're watching shows and you're starting out with the rectangles and squares, those can really help. Especially, like, if you see a panning shot and, like, say it starts, from the bottom of a picture and then it pans up, you can translate that to a comic by having a long panel, and you could practice by picking a favorite scene of a show you have or something, and try to do a thumbnail version of that scene, and pick something short. That I can't emphasize enough. Pick something short if you're going to do that, because you don't want to be on it forever. Something else that's really fun, if you know a manga that got adapted into an anime, check the manga versus the anime scenes and see what they did. See how they adapted it. Especially if people claim it to be a really good adaptation, see what makes it good. Like, how did they pace certain panels versus others? Like, what did they do for the comedy scenes? What did they do for the action scenes? Where did they hold the camera? When did they cut it quickly? If they had to cut corners, what did they cut? Stuff like that. What wasn't important? Especially if there's a really interesting layout on a page, how did they do that? How did they adapt that? What did they see there and then change it? Right? Because sometimes it's not one-to-one. Especially if somebody was trying to adapt this panel into a square frame, what would you they're getting cut off by the other person. If anything, they might have it so that you saw this person first, and then this person's reaction cut in, oh my gosh, oh, split screen, oh. As far as I know, Mew asked about where to put speech bubbles and such. The best advice I think I can have for that is just always leave some negative space. And if you're feeling uneasy about it, put a, what would you call it, a temporary spot where you're going to have this speech bubble. And try to think about what they're going to specifically say. Because obviously more words means a bigger speech bubble. Smaller words can be smaller ones. Unless they're yelling it, then you might want a big one. But if you always leave a little bit of room, you're not going to worry about it too much. So comic layout notes. But that is to say, I'm trying to think if I have any comics right now where I did it. You can see that occasionally it's okay. Don't be afraid. I don't want to make it too light. Don't be afraid to have your character, you can see this went over it a bit. And things, resources and such all over will tell you, don't do this, it's not good, etc. Try it out for yourself. See if you like it. The negative space is usually a really, really good way to go. But a lot of places always say, don't cover the art with the speech bubbles. And I get that. I do. But I have also seen times where covering something with a speech bubble is really effective. Especially if a character is I have no idea where that for, or they said a scathing remark about somebody, and maybe you could represent that by it physically hitting the character or something like that, or somebody maybe is carrying the speech bubble. Oh shoot. Oh, okay, I gotta go look up one. I know it's another one of my comics. I don't think I have it right now though, so I have to go find it. But it's a good example of using speech bubbles in a non-conventional way. Where is it? There it is. Okay. Okay, so there's two here, but I'll take this one. And so these are my OCs. And so the purple character is a motor mouth. So she's asking all these super fast. And then these other two characters were just absolutely overwhelmed by what she's saying. So Valerie here is just getting drowned in all of the text boxes. And then these ones are physically pushing Apolda away. And then you have Gerald in the front here who is just oh my gosh, okay, and then like he's more set to deal with this, so that's why he's not like getting affected by it. In fact, I think the next panel, I already went away from the page, but I'm pretty sure all of the background is like text from that other person, and his hand is down, and he's just like, okay, he's just listening, and then oh, where did it? I shouldn't have closed it. Where did it go? Was this in history? Gosh darn it! You guys can't see this, which is good because I'm just kind of fumbling around. Where did it go? There it is. Okay. So I'll just link it to you guys, and it'll make it easier too, because then the lag won't affect it as much for you guys. But then you can see the one after the one that's in Psy right now. It's just full of text. Then there's nothing, and then he answers. And I'll get the answer one because it's a pretty good one too. So he answers like this. Like there's just a pause where there's nothing, and then he answers because he's like, okay, I can answer all these. And there's also like, it was really fun because it's fun because you see these are all like orderly. You know, like he's answering very like politely and like off the cuff. Well, not off the cuff exactly, but you know, more officially. Meanwhile, Azure is the name of the other girl. She was just kind of like, oh my gosh, like it's more chaotic. But then his is more like, okay, here's a list of all the answers you wanted, and this is another one of those panels where I'm like, I'm not expecting you guys to read this. Anytime I put blah, you don't need to read it. It's optional. Anytime I also put a lot of text like this too is again when it's optional, but that it doesn't mean, you know, you don't need to know any of this stuff. There's some fun stuff in there, but it is optional. And as I was talking before, this panel goes behind him, and that's what I do with the text too often if I have a wall of text. It goes behind the character. And for me, that shows that whatever they're saying, if it goes completely behind, like you can kind of see the words get cut off there. If the words get cut off, that visually shows to me that what they're saying doesn't matter because it's behind them. Nobody really cares. You know, like it could be a conversation happening in the background. And literally in the background, it could be behind the person, and there could be somebody else just having a chat or whatever, and you can see what they're saying, but it's behind them. It's literally behind them, right? And like again, a lot of things say like don't do that, but I've mentioned in other streams when tutorials say stuff like that, always ask why. If they don't really say why, do it and kind of look at it and be like, what does feel wrong about this, or what can I use this for? Because with art you can do pretty much anything, right? And you have standards like don't have, you know, speech bubbles get covered or cover anything else, just for like official things. It looks nice. You have less conflicting information on the page. It's easier to read, stuff like that, and that's all good. But you know, like it depends on what you're trying to convey overall, right? So like it worked here having it behind him for all those reasons I mentioned before. It worked here having a lot of text when you really shouldn't, because the whole point is what he's saying does not matter, or that he's just listing it off, right? Sorry. I love this panel. I love it a lot. There was, I already closed it, but there was also the difference that you can see Azure's speech bubbles are my writing, and then his, partly because it was so much and I was lazy, but I typed it. I typed it and then I put it in here. So it gives another feeling of more professional because it's not written by my hand. And like I said, part of that was kind of laziness, but it worked out. Oh god. But yeah, you can play around a lot with panels and speech bubbles and layouts and such. Again, it's so nice to have the low stakes project just to practice with. And you could even have it as like part 2 to your passion project, where you're like, oh, I want to try this in my passion project, but I'm nervous about it. Then dive in to your low stakes one just for that moment, test it out there, and then, go with it in your passion project, depending on how it works. Okay, so Aqua asks, is all the speech in your comics your own handwriting usually? Yeah. Yeah, it is. Unless it's like Arial or something, like that panel. I think I still have it. Yeah. Unless it's like this. The text walls, that's like the only time it's not my handwriting. Everything else is my handwriting. It's helped make sure that I can write pretty okay. That's at least something. I'm trying to think of other comics I had that were like they did unique fun stuff. Oh, this is actually a good one. Okay, so for most panels I do like the four coma film strip approach. And the reason is because my main platform to post was Tumblr, and is Tumblr usually, right? And it's very vertical. So I switched to this because of the platform I was using. This one, I made it more so for Twitter, so I made it more horizontal. The context on where you're posting a comic, where you're going to have it, really does matter on how you're going to do your layout, because some places, like I said, Tumblr is very vertical oriented. It's going to look better that way, and you can have more control over what you see, how people see it, how they're reading it, how it comes across, stuff like that. Oh, I forgot. It's the ugliest dog I've ever seen. It's a fish. You can even see here that you don't have to have perfect panels either. It can give it a different feel when it's almost a rectangle, right? But it's also stuff like if you have your comic is going to be in a book, or if it's on a web page, stuff like that. Are the pages one after the other on the one page, or is there a next page button? If it's in a book, what's going to be the page after the flip? You'll find often, I have quite a few manga, and sometimes you'll see that between chapters they'll add a little blank page with just a little doodle on it, and I'm pretty sure a part of that is that they want to make sure that some chapters have, they're starting on the right page, so that there are some pages that have twists or big panels and reveals and stuff that are meant to be after a page, or there's a panel that's supposed to be a page turner where you're like, wait, what's this person going to say? And you want to flip to find out what happens next, right? So you want to think about that too when you're making a comic. If it's a long version, is it going to just be a short 4 one? We were talking about adaptation earlier. One thing that always intrigues me is and two-page spreads. Aqua brought up. That's another really important thing, because those are meant to stay together. If they're not together, that's not going to work. Yeah, there's multiple different reasons for, like I said, the context and where those pages are matters. The two-page spreads, the page turners, the surprise, those revelations, stuff like that. It's all important. People think about those things, right? It's set up that way. So that's mostly you think about these things a bit more when you have long form stuff, but again, like my comics and such like that, you have to think about that. But what I was going to get into is one of the most interesting types of manga adaptations that I see is 4-koma ones. The ones where the entire series is 4-komas. Because they can either turn out amazing or they can just be completely subpar. Because like the subpar ones don't get that same like wham, wham, wham. Like the good timing to put it together. Because so many 4-komas too are like separated little tiny stories. And like even the ones that have connected plots to them are set up as, here's setup, or here's where we are, here's setup, punchline, follow through, or something like that, right? Like they're all set up in that same like get to the joke, there's the joke, and then set up new joke, get to the joke, boom, boom, boom. And sometimes the pacing per joke in a 4-koma, even though they're all 4-komas, like they're all 4 panels, they can still be different. So you have to find out what really works. I can't remember what it was called, but I remember one of the 4-komas I read when I was younger. I loved it, reading the comic. And then there was an adaptation, and I watched it, and I just did not laugh. Like, I laughed so much. And, like, a part of it you could say is, like, okay, you already knew the jokes and stuff, but it's like, that goes for a certain extent. It should still be funny, like a chuckle, like, especially because it was years later, like, it should still be a bit fresh, because I'd forgotten, like, some of the jokes, like, even though I knew them. But the timing just wasn't there. I remember thinking, like, this was really slow. Like, some of the, like, a character slips on something, and it was slow. And I remember going, like, well, why did you, like, when I read it, I remember reading that specific one, because I was waiting for that moment to happen in the show. And I was just disappointed, because I was like, I remember thinking it was, like, so fast, like, poof, like, and then it just wasn't. So it's incredibly difficult to get 4-komas in, like, specifically to work out. We're already at the hour point right now, but I think I will try to find at least one more, like, example of something that I can show off from one of mine. I'm trying to remember any sort of comic I had in the past that had, like, a really... I should try to think of a text wall one. Shoot, was there a text wall one? Oh, there must have been. I know there was. I use them so much. Where is it? Is it just not in this one? Darn, I guess it wasn't in this one. Seems there'd be an entire science branch dedicated to 4-komas, like types of panel layouts and the page for 4-komas. What scene atmosphere to be put in the first panel, second, yeah. Yeah, no, I was looking for those ones. So those. I have one here that's like kind of a fun one for like it's a bit of spoilers, but I'll just zoom in on the specific one. It can be really fun to put text inside people's eyes where it's like and coloration can really help to set a mood. Well, I guess that's not really panel stuff. Oh yeah, narration boxes. Those are always fun. One thing with narration boxes that you almost always have, they're almost always in the top left corner. Sometimes you can have like a joke where maybe like the narrator is more of a character. So then you could have it like in the corner here. Like maybe a character said something over here. And they're like, what could go wrong? And then the narrator goes, everything went wrong. You know? Something like that. Yeah, World Only Knows has a lot of the text in the eye jokes, and I love it so much. That's actually a really good example of things carrying over from, you know, media you like into your own stuff. Yeah, please, no. I just really I love stuff like that. Breath of the Wild. Oh, I don't have a lot of them saved right now. Oh, I know I've done. I should have prepped more. I know I've done more that had like more interesting stuff to them. I can't really. Oh, Ultramoon. Oh, I would have had them in my. Darn it! I'm too good at clearing out my files. And by clearing out, I mean putting them in a different spot, just not on my computer anymore. No, I don't want to spoil that. I can't think of any right now. But it is about an hour anyway. I hope this was at least somewhat easy-ish to watch if the mic was working, and that things still got through even though a lot of frames were dropping. I did record this, so hopefully that didn't mess up. So there's at least like the YouTube version to watch and like actually see stuff. I am gonna look into what I think might be causing it, and hopefully that'll be better next week. But speaking of next week, I think it might be fun to start doing some Twitch streams where I'm like working on. I don't honestly, Zells, I don't think it's quite Twitch. I think it was something on my end because it's been okay right now. I'm glad to hear it was helpful, Mew. But yeah, I want to work on stuff like, you know, a stream. I almost spelled it wrong. I almost put strem. Stream starting soon. You know, like images like that. You know, like a background for the Twitch channel. Stuff like that. You know, because I feel like that'd be fun, especially if you guys are here and we're like building it together. I feel like that would be really fun. You know, if I'm like, ooh, I want to add a border. What color should it be? Or, you know, what should I have in the background? Should we draw Sapphire Smith again, which is a character we made on the stream, right? So I really think that would be fun to like create it as a community sort of thing. And then, because each stream is only like an hour long, so I feel like that's a good amount of time to make stuff like that. So, and then it wouldn't be like, it'd be related to the stream, you'd get to see it later, you know, you could be like, oh hey, there's the background I suggested, you know, like, I don't know, I just feel like it'd be a lot of fun. But thank you guys for tuning in, and especially since it was buffering a lot and not being the best. Hopefully next week will be a lot better. And at least the YouTube video should be okay. And I'll have that up at least before next week, so yeah, thank you guys for hanging out, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.